Solo come voi.
I'm just like you.
我和你一样。
We're just like you.
我是西狗木团。
I'm just like you.
I am just like you.
We are just like you.
Soy como tú.
I'm just like you.
I'm
just like you.
I am just like
You.
I'm just like you. I like art.
My favorite song is Michael Jackson.
I make jewelry. I made this bracelet.
I like to read, eat, and sleep.
Mi piace a scuola, un pochino a scuola.
I like to sing Smooth Criminal and Billie Jean.
I like ice cream. I like tacos.
Moi, j'ai aimé à jouer foot.
Red and pink are my favorite colors.
Off the wall. Thriller.
You want to sing one?
No. Me gusta la gimnasia.
I love my sister.
That's your brother, silly. You're a sister.
我最喜欢的颜色是紫色。
I like taekwondo. I am born to be a leader.
We're twins. My favorite color is dark blue.
I like to carry the torch for Special Olympics.
I am just like you.
I'm just like you.
Io sono come voi.
I'm just like you.
Hi, welcome to Movement Monday. I'm Molly Korte, founder of Project Just Like You. I began Project Just Like You after my son Jacob was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder back in 2016. I immediately jumped in and began sharing stories of how we are all more alike than different. Because I feel like when we focus on what we have in common, we crush the stereotypes, we crush the prejudices, we crush the barriers, and we see a person. We see a dignified human being. And that's the way I feel like we should look at every single person. Because once you're able to see a person, that's where a friendship can begin. We then started Movement Monday. This is a new initiative of 2018 for Project Just Like You. And we interview people on Movement Monday who we feel are representing the disability community in a special way. And they are making movement, and they are making waves, and they are helping to create a force of inclusion. Tonight, we are very excited to have Amanda Morin with us. Amanda is an author, speaker, parent, advocate, and former early childhood educator. Amanda worked in the classrooms and is an early intervention specialist for 10 years. She currently works as an in-house expert, writer, and content development manager for the National Center for Learning Disabilities Understood.org program. She's also the author of 3 books, the Everything Parents Guide to Special Education, the Everything Kids Learning Activities book, and On the Go Fun for Kids, more than 250 activities to keep little ones busy and happy anytime, anywhere. Amanda received a bachelor's degree in education from the University of Maine and a special education advocacy training from the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates. Ms. Morin has written for and served as an expert resource for numerous outlets, including NPR Ed, Education Week, Associated Press, the AP, The Atlantic, Washington Post, Parenting Special Needs Magazine, and more. We are so thrilled to have Amanda with us tonight. Now, before we begin, we know that there are people who are watching this from all over the country, maybe even from all over the globe. We'd love to know where you're from because we'll be giving you a shout out tonight. So if you could just give us your name and where you're from, and then we'll give you a shout out and welcome you to our program. We also are encouraging you to watch questions. Tonight, one lucky person will win one of Amanda's books, which we're so excited about because she has some amazing resources for parents with special needs children. So welcome, Amanda. We are so glad to have you with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm exhausted hearing my own introduction, so I think I need to go to bed now.
I think it's incredible, Amanda, and this is why we asked you to be part of this tonight because
I'm so glad to be. I am so glad you did ask me, and I'll just shout out. I'm in Maine, so I'll shout out. I'll start out with that.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Good. Well, we are glad. Did you grow up in Maine?
I did. I grew up in Bangor, home of Stephen
Oh,
King.
sure.
Yeah. But
absolutely.
Live in southern Maine now, just outside of Portland. And
okay, perfect. Yeah, we have one of our neighbors actually in our neighborhood. She grew up in Maine.
Oh, no. It's a small world. It really is.
It is.
Yeah.
Maine's a beautiful state. I was there once when I was a child, and it was beautiful. So
you were probably not there in winter. It's beautiful in most seasons, other than winter and mud season, but otherwise it's great.
No, we went during the summertime. Where there are lobster, we saw the lobster festival. There was like a lobster parade and then lobster. Yeah.
Yep, that's Rockland. Yep.
Okay, that's where we were. It was a lovely
way
time.
off topic already, but it's great.
We want to welcome right now, we want to say hello to Emily, Sam, Brian, Reagan in Iowa. Oh, Emily's in Richmond, Eleonora, Emily from Kansas, Kelly in Virginia, and Rebecca in Richmond. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Becca and Mosley.
Oh, and Becca and Mosley. So we have quite a few people who are with us tonight. And we're encouraging you to ask lots of questions. So like I said, we're going to have a drawing, and one of you awesome people are going to win one of her books tonight. So first off, you were just in Disney World. How was that?
Oh, it was wonderful. And it's interesting because, like you, I have two children who are on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And so taking them to Disney World, it's sort of our go-to vacation. You'd never think it would be because it's so, and I actually have sensory issues too. And I tell people that a lot. So I'm very sensory overwhelmed quite often. And for some reason, Disney is just this fantasy place for us. And we just kind of let it go and do it at our own pace. And we just had so much fun. And being a redhead, I'm actually tan, but you can't tell. This is me with a tan, which is really sad because I would burst into flame if I didn't put sunscreen on. It was really warm. It was lovely. The kids had a great time. It was just everything we could have asked for. And it was, I always just love going and knowing that it's an inclusive place. Disney is really inclusive. They do such a nice job with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's one of the reasons we love to go so much is because we know that they will sort of accommodate any of the needs that arise, whether they're expected or unexpected. And it's wonderful. Yeah.
No, that's great, Amanda. And, I'm glad that you said that because we struggle where we're talking about a trip to Disney World. And we're struggling right now with, do we take Jacob to it or is that going to be sensory overload for him? So I'm glad to hear that with all the sensory, all the sensory needs that you guys have, that's an okay place for everyone to go.
I mean, we bring the noise canceling headphones with us. We bring sort of an on-the-go sensory kit. I actually wrote a piece on understood.org on tips for taking kids with sensory issues to amusement parks.
Nice.
Because I feel like you pull on the experiences you have when you're doing those kinds of things. And I think it's just a matter of like doing it at your own pace. I think Disney can have this feel of, hurry up, we're heading to our vacation. We have to hurry up and be on vacation, but just doing it at your own pace and taking the time you need to do it really has been the key for us, is to be able to say, we're done for the day. We're going to go back to the hotel. We're going to swim for a while. And just be okay with that.
Yeah.
That took some time, was to realize it's okay. Your vacation is your vacation, however you need to do it. And it's so much fun.
That's such a great point, because I think we all have this mentality of not just Disney World, but anywhere we go to, especially with children that have those sensory issues, you feel like you need to do it all. And you need to get it done. And oh my gosh, we're spending so much money to go X, Y, Z. And of course we have to hit this, this, and this. But you're so right, Amanda. If we just took the time to say, no, the circumstances don't, or, the idea of going on vacation doesn't dictate. Our personal circumstances tell us what we can and cannot handle.
And I think for us, it was a matter, it took time to get there, because you always have this like, well, we want to get our money's worth of our vacation.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the end of the day, vacation, you're supposed to be relaxed, right? You're supposed to be calm. You're supposed to be kind of, everybody's having fun. And if nobody's having fun, then it's not a vacation.
That's right. Yeah.
To get there. And so what we did with each of our sons, one's 15 and one's 8. Wow, he's 8. Oh my gosh. We asked them.
8-year-old too.
I know. So, and my oldest, we don't even talk. She's an adult at this point, so she's still in college. She didn't get to come with us, and she'll do the next trip.
Sure.
We asked each of them to give us like the top 3 things they wanted to do, and we made sure to get to those top 3 things, as opposed to tell us everything you want to do in Disney World. So that's
a great idea.
Yeah,
kept it simple.
Yeah, simplify. It's
excellent.
Hard to do, easy to say, hard to do, right?
Right. Wonderful. Well, I know Advocacy World is your world, Amanda, and it's a big part of who you are and what you do. What drives you to continue doing what you're doing? What walk us through this, Amanda? Like, tell us about this, about your life.
Interesting question. I didn't know this is where I would end up in my life, I think, is the sort of the first answer to that. When I started teaching, I was really drawn to the kids who were a little more difficult to teach, a little more challenging to teach, a little didn't learn as easily as all the other kids. Those were the kids that I really loved teaching. And then I had my own kids and realized their developmental path was a little different than I expected. And when I started going through the process of getting services in place and evaluations and all of that with my oldest son, I realized that doing it as a parent is so different from understanding the system as an educator. I was like a mess. I was a disaster. I knew the system inside out. I knew what I had to do, but I would walk out of meetings just like bawling. And once I got to a place where things were better and we had things sort of set, I realized, okay, so I have this knowledge and I have this parental knowledge, and now I need to put them together and start helping other people. And it's sort of this path that I ended up on. And now I wouldn't give it up for the world, just because I feel like if I help this sounds so corny. It sounds so corny. But if I'm helping one person, that's one person who can then help one more person, who can then help one more person. It's like this ripple effect. I love what I do. And I say, as an advocate, my job is to put myself out of a job, right? If I've done it well.
Yes.
And other people can do it themselves.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think that sounds corny at all, Amanda. It sounds to me like when you find your calling, which it sounds like you found your calling just through sheer taking what was frustrating for you and making a purpose of that, bringing that into fruition to help others. I think that's what it's all about. And
yeah, I totally agree. And I think, what I love about the project Just Like You and how it fits into what I do is I'm always saying to parents, like, your child is your child no matter what, right? And I think a lot of times when people hear a diagnosis or they hear somebody talking or they read a paper about their child, it's really hard to remember sometimes that that's the same kid who makes you laugh, who annoys you, who doesn't close the refrigerator door, who who says the silliest things. It's the same kid you had yesterday. Right. And I think what I love about what you're doing, which really matches with what I want parents to understand, is that nothing changes. The child you have is still the child you have. Mm-hmm. And there's still this amazing, crazy ball of whatever at the end of the day. And I think that's what I really want to do, is I want people to learn that that's okay. It's like whoever you are is who you are. Yeah. And that's perfect.
Yeah. I just finished Partners in Policy Making, Amanda, here in the state of Virginia. Yeah. And one of the people we listened to, one of our guests, was Kathy Snow. I'm sure you're familiar with who she is. Yeah. And she said to us, her whole thing is disability is natural. It's just a part of, like, you have blonde hair, you have blue eyes, you wear glasses, whatever it is. Like, that's just who, it doesn't define the person. It's just part of the person. And I think if we can get into a part of our society, a place in our society where we just see people as people and they happen to have XYZ, whatever that is, because we have so many different traits, just as another trait that makes up a person, then I think that alone diminishes that fear and diminishes that, like, oh, yeah, you're just a person, duh.
Right. And at the end of the day, you think about all of the things that we want kids to learn and all of the things that they need to be good at. And at the end of the day, I always think about, is that something I can do? I don't know if I could do that, right. I'm always trying to make sure I'm looking at things from a realistic perspective, and making sure that what I'm asking of my kids, what I'm asking of other people's kids, are things that we would ask of anybody's kids to do. I love that perspective, that disability is just part of life. I think the more that we raise it up as a separate issue, the more we're adding to stigma. I know that sounds kind of backwards, but I think if we just accept, one of the things I wrote a blog post at one point, and I remember saying that without exclusion, we wouldn't have inclusion. Like, you wouldn't have to talk about inclusion if you didn't have exclusion. And so I think that there's this point where it's just kind of like, if we just accepted that everybody's on this gamut of the world and everybody's sort of who they are, then that's what advocacy is about, is just remembering that people are people and they have differing abilities and that they may need differing supports. I work really hard with my kids to understand that equal isn't the same thing as fair. And I think that's a tough thing. Excuse me, my chair just fell down. Goodness. Okay.
No, absolutely. We also want to welcome a few new people. Kim Owens and Lindsay, Leah, Maria, and Wendy. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And again, we are with author Amanda Morin. And we are encouraging you to write questions. Send us your questions, because one lucky person who asks a question will win one of her books tonight. We do have a question for you, Amanda. Emily Bauer asks, what motivates you to write your books? She has two questions for you. So that's the first one. And I'll let you answer that question, then I'll ask you the next one.
What motivates me to write my books? My goodness. I'd love to say money, but it's not money.
Right.
Yeah. I think the answer is different for each book. The Everything Guide to Special Education is sort of a step-by-step guide for advocacy. And the motivation for that book was to be able to give parents the tools that I wished I'd had when I started going through this process. And so that was the motivation for that book. The other books are kind of, they're fun. They're fun, and it's a way of building learning into life. And so there's sort of the first one, the Everything Kids Learning Activities book. is split into different domains. It's sort of it's writing and sensory things and this stuff. And it's activities you can do at home, everyday life with everyday stuff that you have just to support your kids' learning. And I wrote that one because it was so much fun. I was a kindergarten teacher for many years, and I collected all of these fun little things, activities and things that I was doing. And I realized these are things that parents could be doing at home too. And I thought I would collect them and put them together. And then the last one is the On the Go Fun for Kids. It's a much smaller, I wish I had a copy of it on my desk. I don't have a copy on my desk to show you, but it's little things you can do in those in-between times. So when you're sitting in line at the bank, or if you're in the doctor's waiting room, just these little games and things that you can play to help entertain and help your child grow. Just because it's fun to watch kids learn. It's fun to watch them sort of expand their knowledge. And it's fun to get to know who your kids are, right? To me, that's a big motivator, is to be able to have a way to have your children teach you who they are. That's so much fun as they get older. That's a long answer.
No, that's a great answer. Kids, it sounds like your kindergarten class had a lot of inspiration. They do that, don't they?
They do.
They keep you on your toes to create more activities.
Absolutely.
And the other question she asked you, that Emily asked you, is when did you decide you wanted to teach?
I think I always knew. I was the kid who ran a babysitting ring out of her home when I was younger. I always babysat. I was a lifeguard and a swim teacher when I was in high school. I think it chose me. So I think I just always knew I wanted to teach.
It was in your blood.
Yeah. And actually, I come from a family of teachers. So I think it was just sort of what I knew and what I loved. And what I do now, I think, is teaching too. I'm teaching parents. I'm not teaching kids. I do miss working directly with kids, but I feel like I'm doing it peripherally because I'm teaching parents.
Excellent. Yeah, you're teaching everyone. So speaking of parents, how do you empower other parents to become advocates, Amanda?
So this is an interesting question. I actually was just thinking about this the other day. So I'm glad you asked me this. It's like I had a colleague school me at one point because I had said something. I said that to me it was like a 3E process when I went through this with my kids. The first, when I was first learning sort of what was going on and why my son was acting maybe a little differently than people had expected. When I first learned why, I would use it as an excuse, sort of like to excuse the behavior. And then when I got better at it, it was a way to explain it. And then when I got better at understanding, it was a way to educate other people around it. And I stopped there and I said, like, so it's 3 E's. And I had a colleague say to me, there's a 4th E. And I kind of went, okay, tell me about the 4th E. And he told me the 4th E is empower. And what you need to do is empower your children, but you have to empower yourself before you empower your children to advocate. And it's sort of, that's what stuck with me, is this idea that once you empower people to get beyond the place where they're explaining and educating and excusing, and they really have this feeling of, okay, I really understand this, and I really know that this is mine, and I can own it, and I can be confident that you've empowered them. And so I was really glad he did that. At the time, I was not so glad that he said to me, you're missing something. But once he did, I realized, yep, that's what it's about. It's all about empowering people to understand things and take away from it what they need to take away from it so they can teach other people.
That's awesome. So by challenging you, he made you grow.
He did. He empowered me to grow. He did. He did a good job.
But yes, that growth is so frustrating at the time, though. It's like, darn it, of course I know everything. What are you talking about? And then
I know. Well, we can all learn things always.
That's right. Absolutely. We also want to welcome Tammy and Laurie, who just joined our show. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Again, we have Amanda Morin with us, who is an author and an advocate, and she is doing amazing things.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining. I'm so glad that there are people listening and asking questions and throwing in comments. If you want to comment, feel free to.
Absolutely. We encourage comments too. We have another question for you, Amanda. Maria asks, where can we see and buy your books? And how easy are they to understand?
Okay, those are really well. The first one is a great question. The second one I think is a really great question. The first one is you can find them pretty much anywhere. My publisher was bought by Simon & Schuster. You can buy it directly through Simon & Schuster. You can go to Amazon, you can go to your bookstore. So pretty much anywhere you can buy them. And easy to understand. Most everything I write, whether it's for a publication or whether it's a book, is written at 8th grade level or reading level or below, because I really am aware of the fact that parents are busy. They need things in digestible ways and practical tips. I'm a parent myself. I'm busy, and I have a hard time when I'm trying to get through things to read really big chunks of text. So everything's broken down very methodically and with headings and things like that. So I think they're pretty easy to read. And what I would say is, Maria, if you don't think it's easy to read, let me know and I will help you find something that's easier to read. And that sounds like, I don't mean it as snarky as it sounded. It came out snarky and I didn't mean it at all. I just mean, like, I would love the feedback. If you don't find it easy to read, it would be really helpful for me to know. And then I can work on changing that. So
Excellent. Great. Thank you, Maria. That was a great question. We have another question for you, Amanda. Lindsay asks, what is one thing you can teach a child to empower themselves? Wow, what a great question, Lindsay.
One thing. Wow, one thing. My gosh. I think the one thing I think self-advocacy, and I think that's like a big one thing, right? So there are many components to self-advocacy, but I think the sooner we start teaching kids to speak up for what they need, and I think that's all kids. I don't think it's just kids who have differing abilities. I think it's all kids.
Absolutely.
Speaking up for what they need, wherever it is, whether it's encouraging your child to order from the menu at themselves at a restaurant, whether it's encouraging your child to say, no, I'm not comfortable with hugging you, Grandma, but I'll give you a high five. Whatever it is going to help your child. I think self-advocacy is that one thing to start with.
That's excellent, right? And I'm glad that you brought that up, Amanda, because we live in society, in a world where children learn, if I don't hug so-and-so, then that must make me a bad person. There's something wrong with me. When really what we should be teaching our child is to listen to their own internal instincts. Right. And if their internal instinct says, you know what, I don't want to hug this person, even though this person's a family member or there's something in them telling them they need to listen to themselves. And we suppress that as parents a lot of the times.
And I think we do it so we don't want to, because we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Right. But I think, and it's something that I've learned over time as a parent myself. It's not something that I just naturally knew as a parent, was to be able to read my own kids' cues and realize when they were uncomfortable, and to be able to back off and let them know that I trust their own instincts. And to be able to empower them to trust their instincts as well. I mean, not always, because, when you have little kids and their instinct is to go run into the road, that's not a great instinct, right? So you have to teach them different skills. So there's a difference between teaching explicit safety skills and trusting instincts. But I do think that self-advocacy is more than just speaking up in school. It's a matter of speaking up in your entire life.
Absolutely. And I think that's awesome that you did that. And you saw me waving my finger because my little one just came down the stairs. So
no problem.
What is she doing over there? Well, that's it. My 6-year-old decided to come down the stairs. So one of the questions, and I'm going to ask you this, Amanda, because this was asked to me, and I'm curious on how you would respond to this. What advice would you give a parent what would you say? What advice would you give them who just found out their child was diagnosed?
I think that's such a tough question to answer, but I think it's a really important question to answer. I think it depends on where the parent is with that diagnosis, right? Sometimes it's a very hard thing to hear. It's interesting. I mentioned that I have 2 children who are autistic.
Yeah.
One also has ADHD. They're 7 years apart in age. And I had done it the first time, right? The first time we'd done it, we had the diagnosis. And even when our second child was diagnosed, it was like a really stunning journey all over again. And it surprised me. I think the first thing is I would say to a parent, take the time to let that sink in and figure out what you need to do with it, right? I think oftentimes you hear a diagnosis and you think, I need to think about the rest of their life right now. And you don't need to think about the rest of their life right now. What you need to think about is, what do you do next? What do you need to move forward next? Mm-hmm. And whether it's support, whether it's finding your tribe, as I like to say, your tribe is your online tribe, your in-person tribe, whoever it is who can support you in understanding mm-hmm. what it is you need to do next. And I think it's a matter of taking that step back and saying, okay, what does this mean practically? And what does this mean sort of hypothetically are two different things, right? Because your mind can go into all of these places of what this is going to look like for the rest of your child's life, but you really don't know. You don't know. What you need to know is what's your next step and what does your child need for support from both you and like maybe the school and community. And I think just the first thing I always say to parents is it's not always going to feel the same. It's a journey, and it's like a roller coaster sometimes. And it's no different than parenting any other type of child. It's always a roller coaster. You never quite know what's going to happen next. But if you can kind of look at the schematics of various roller coasters, you might have an idea of where the dips might come. So I think educating yourself is the first thing, is to know what you might need to know. That's such an obscure way of putting it, but I think just learning more about the diagnosis and then sort of taking what makes sense with the child you have and making more of that, and then sort of putting to the side the things that don't necessarily fit yet, and kind of think this may be something I need to know down the line too. It's a lot to take in. It's just a lot to take in. And I think it's really important to just keep foremost that this is your child, the same child you had before the diagnosis. And I know I said that earlier, and I keep coming back to that because it's so important to remember that your diagnosis is not your child. Your child is your child.
That's right. Absolutely. And that is such a great point. And it's something that I don't understand why it's so lost on us in our society and in our world. I don't understand why it seems to dominate over anything else. Because really, again, Kathy Snow, she said, if you live long enough, all of us have a disability.
Absolutely.
Yes, we all have something. And it blows my mind. It really does. And maybe for me, this is why I started into the whole advocacy work, because my mind's always been, little background on me. When I was a little girl, I went crabbing with my parents. We went actually with a big group of people, a bunch of neighbors. And I didn't quite get the concept. I mean, maybe it was kindergarten, first grade, really young. And I didn't quite get the concept that the reason we were crabbing was to steam them later on that night. And I was so upset when I put the pieces together that I went in when everyone else went back to the house and they were all getting ready to cook the crabs. I went back down the hill and started dumping those buckets of crabs into the ocean, or, back into, not the ocean, but, the sea that was there. And of course, oh my gosh, running out of the house, what are you doing? So for me, ever since I was a child, I've always been, I think it's just been in my blood of of course you want to help the person who doesn't have the voice, who the underdog, the whatever you want to call it. And I don't know. It's for me, it's just so natural. Of course you accept people for who they are. I don't understand.
I know. And it's really interesting that you say, you always want to help the underdog. Yeah. If you think about it, eventually in life, all of us are the underdog.
Yes.
Right? There's always going to be a point where you're the underdog and you'd always want somebody else to help you.
Correct.
When you're the underdog. And now I have the underdog theme song going through my head. I think that we get so focused on labels, and labels help kids get supports. I mean, that's the unfortunate way that sometimes the system works, is labels help kids get supports that they need to really thrive. But it doesn't mean that you're putting a label on your kid and keeping it there, right? If I have 3 children and their labels are Megan, Jacob, and Benjamin, and that's who they are, Megan, Jacob, and Benjamin. And whatever else they are, they claim that as their identity as they move forward, right? It's hard. I think it's hard because we live in a society that sort of likes to put everything into neat boxes, and people don't fit into neat boxes. Nobody fits into like a neat little box. No. And we'd be so boring if we did. Right. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Oh, I totally 100% agree with you. And I think that's, again, another excellent point of we are so, each person is so unique in who we are. And we all have unique traits, whatever those may be, and they need to be celebrated because it makes up who you are. And each person, I believe, has a great contribution to this life. And we are perfect the way we are. We don't need to change who we are.
And I think, I don't want to make light of the fact that some people have challenges, right? I think that's really important to note, because I think a lot of times it can be really sort of Pollyanna to say that those kind of things. And I think there are things that are going to be more challenging for people than for others, right? And I think that's really important to note and to be really upfront about saying. But it doesn't mean that there's no other value, right? What challenges you is not what defines you. It's everything else. Everything put together is what defines you. You are the sum of all your parts, not just your challenges and not just the things that you do well. All of that together is who makes you this unique you.
Oh, of course, absolutely. Yeah. And I think going along with that, though, I think some of the most, people who have the most challenges in this life also have the most growth opportunities. And they have, when you have those mountains in front of you, there's only one thing to do. That's to climb them. And I think, in a way, having those obstacles in this life are gifts, because it only helps us grow as people to the best of our ability, if we see it that way, if we choose to.
And I think for me, my kids have taught me that there's more than one way to climb that mountain. There are ways to climb the mountains that I never would have thought of. And they see it, and for them, sometimes they don't even see it as a mountain. And so I try really hard not to anticipate what's going to be their mountain. The whole make a mountain out of a molehill kind of thing.
Sure.
For me, I may be making a mountain out of a molehill, but also sometimes they may see the path around the mountain that I didn't even know was there. And so I learn from them as much as I think they learn from me. And that's one of the things that I really think is really great about watching other people and interacting with other people, is just taking the lessons away from what they show you. If you can see things through somebody else's eyes for just a minute, it's really an extraordinary experience to be able to see what they can see. And I think it's really a privilege to be able to do that sometimes.
Absolutely. And, I think that's a great point you just brought up, is that it does give you, when people think differently than the mainstream way, it gives you new perspectives. And that's another gift we have, is, new perspectives and new ideas and new way, like you said, different ways of climbing that mountain. Yeah. And thank goodness for that. Thank goodness that we have.
Right.
We also want to say hi to Robin, who just joined us. Thank you for joining us tonight, Robin. We have Amanda Morin with us. We have another question for you. And this is from Emily. What are some tips to help people find their own unique voice in this world?
Wow, that's a big question, isn't it? Thank you for that question. It's a big question. I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that. Like I can try to the best, but I feel like summing things up into tips gives me a power that I don't actually have, right? Can you ask the question again? Because I'm like stuck.
Oh yeah, no, of course. So Emily wants to know, what are some tips to help people find their own unique voice in this world?
So I think the first thing is to listen, right? So you have to listen to the voice that they already have. And I think one of the other things is to let them show you, to explore. So I think when we're talking about kids in particular, give them all these opportunities to explore all sorts of things, right? I think, not every kid's going to be a baseball player, but they may love playing baseball, even if it's just picking dandelions in left field, which was me when I played baseball when I was a kid.
Me
I
too.
was curling around and picking dandelions, but I enjoyed it, right? So
I did the same thing in soccer.
Yeah, I'm not much of an athlete.
And all the kids were running around kicking, and I was literally going around trying to save the little animals from not being stepped on by the cleats. That was me.
And that's who you are now, right? So that's how I think
it was a perfect fit when Jacob was born into his family.
That's amazing. I think to help people find their voice, you have to give them space to speak. Right. And I think that's a lot of times people are uncomfortable with silence. They're uncomfortable with those pauses. They're uncomfortable with the I don't knows, the I'm not there yet, those kinds of things, the what ifs. And I think one of the really important things in helping somebody find their voice is letting them work through that space and just giving them a place where they can feel safe to explore who they are. Right. And I talk about this with my husband in a way that God love him, that he gets it when I say it. It's a matter of like, when you tell your story, you're handing it to somebody, right? And you're saying, this is a gift. This is something that's really precious to me, and I need you to hold it, and I need you to hold it right here and be really gentle with it, right? I need you to take care of it for me for a minute. Mm-hmm. And when you hand it back, hopefully it's a little bit lighter because I've told you my story, but you've taken good care of it. He understands it when I say it, and it doesn't, but I think it's a matter of letting people tell you who they are. And if they don't know yet who they are, tell them who you are, so you can start making those connections about how you learned. I think sometimes learning to hear you, to help somebody find their own voice, you have to explain to them how you found your voice. And they can either take that and use it as a way that they don't want to find their voice, or they can take it and use it as a way that as a path that they can also follow to find their own voice. And it's interesting. I said to you that like I'm very sensory challenged. Yeah. It took me a long time to admit that to the people I work with. I live in Maine. My office is in New York City. When I go into New York City, my colleagues are wonderful about understanding when I have to just say, I'm done for the night. I need to go back to my hotel. I'm overwhelmed. But it took me forever to admit that to them. It was always like, oh, I have something to do. I have to go call home. I have to go call the boys. But for a long time, I wasn't willing to use my voice. And finally, somebody said to me, what's going on with you? What is, and I said, this is so ridiculous. I have 2 kids who I talk about this. I'm trying to teach them to speak up for themselves. It's my turn to do that. And so I think sometimes it's a matter of just giving somebody the place where they can feel comfortable using their voice. And I think it's important to note that your voice may not actually be your voice. It may be something else, it may be a different way of communicating as well. That is so off topic. I went in such a different
Amanda. That is so inspiring. I love that. I love that you got to the point, because that's so hard for us to do. That's so hard for us to use our own voice. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you did, and you finally said, this is my voice and this is how I'm going to use it. I'm not going to make excuses. I'm going to tell you up front, and I'm going to let you decide how to take that information. And of course, I'm sure, the honesty, I'm sure, was just refreshing for everyone. and like, okay, now we're all on the same page.
I love that you said that you let them take it how they're going to take it, right? Because I think that's part of learning to use your voice, is to understand that not everybody's going to hear it the way you need them to, but that's about them and not about you.
Mm-hmm.
If you're
Absolutely.
talking about, you can't control how other people react to what you have to say.
That's right.
But you can control what it is you want to tell them.
Yes.
And I think that's such an important point that you made. You know, and the interesting thing is, luckily I worked for the National Center for Learning Disabilities, where that was pretty well.
They took that information probably very well and said, fantastic, Amanda, good.
And actually a bunch of them said, well, that explains so much about you. And I kind of wanted to know what that meant. But, you know, I think in the end, it was a really good thing, because now people are much more aware of that, and they'll be like, well, do you want to go to a choir? Do you want to just do like a one-on-one lunch? Do you want to, you know, they're very respectful of it, but they didn't have to be. And that would have been okay too, right?
Yeah.
Because, yeah. So I think it's such a good point to say, and then they choose what to do with that information.
Right. Well, you know, I give a lot of that credit to my dad. When I was growing up, my dad raised me in this way that was just, he believed in empowering. He was a very inspiring man. And I say he was because he did pass this past year.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. But he really believed, he loved having a daughter. And I was his one daughter. And he loved having a daughter because he really believed in empowering women. At the time, you know, future women. Right. And so he raised me in such a way that to take responsibility for my own actions, to take responsibility for my own words. And so one of the message that he constantly said to me is, speak truth, Molly, and then let other people decide how they're going to handle it, but always side on the side of truth. And it was such a powerful message. And, you know, and I credit actually a lot of my work of what I do now back to my dad's influence.
Absolutely. Well, you have lived it. You certainly lived that message. It's clear. It's clear that you lived that. It's wonderful to see.
Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that. And I'm glad that it comes across like that, because that's, you know, we're just trying to make this world a better place for our kids. So I have another question for you, Amanda, that I'm curious on. What is one of the most defining experiences of your own personal advocacy journey?
Oh my goodness. That's a hard one to answer, because I get to this place sometimes where my story and my kids' stories, you have to figure out what's theirs to tell and what's mine to tell at this point. So I think the best I can say is there came a point in our older son's life where we had to make some decisions about what our next steps were in order to make sure he was okay, right? To define okay, to make sure he was doing well. Mm. And they were hard choices to make. They were hard decisions to make. And ones that as a parent, you never want to come to, sort of like, where do you go next? And so for me, making the choice that was best for him, but wasn't necessarily what I wanted for him, was a really defining moment. A moment where I had to step back and say, this isn't about me. This is about him. This is not about what I want for him. This is about what he needs now. Was a really defining moment for me to be able to say, this isn't about me. This isn't about my idea of what is going to be or what should be or what kind of mom I need to be. It's about what he needs now. And that's vague, but it's vague because the rest of the story is his to tell. And I want to respect.
Sure, absolutely. And we respect, of course, that privacy.
Of course.
But I think we understood, I mean, at least I can speak for myself. I understood the message at large of what you were saying. That's a hard one, because we want so much to protect our children, and yet our children are their own people too, and their voices need to be heard, and that needs to be respected as well. And that can always be a fine line. But if we're truly, like you were talking about advocacy work, trying to get yourself out of your own, work yourself out of a job.
Right.
It's the same thing with parenting. There's such a two opposite forces at work, isn't there? Where you want to hold on because they're your baby, and you also know that they need to grow as people because they need to be self-sufficient adults one day.
Yeah, and I think letting go of ideas of what should be versus what has been a really powerful thing for me as a parent. I think as much as we want to say we don't have expectations for our kids, we always have expectations. And at the end of the day, it has been a very humbling lesson for me to realize that my expectations need to be in line with the kids I have and not to make the kids I have in line with my expectations. And it's been very humbling, but very, I think, good for all of our relationships. It's been very good for the way we interact together. And it's not something that I learned easily. I think I will say that. I have 3 kids, and the older 2 say, the youngest one's got it made, Mom. Like, he gets smooth. And what I say is, you were my practice kids. The older 2, you were my practice kids. This one I've got figured out because I've done this for so long. Which is not true. Sorry, guys, if you're watching. No, that's not true. We don't really practice kids.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, Amanda, this has definitely been a fantastic, I don't even want to call it an interview, just like chit chat with you.
Yeah.
It's really, I just find you to be such an inspiring person and individual as an advocate. And it's been absolutely wonderful. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much.
Tonight.
I would say the same thing back. I mean, this has just been it's like sitting in each other's kitchens and having a conversation. And
Absolutely.
It's been lovely. It's been great.
It has been. And I'm so thankful for your time tonight. And we are going to, we're going to do a drawing here, and we'll get the information to you, Amanda. So we'll have the person email us.
Great.
We want you to pick a number between 1 and 14.
Oh, no. About 9.
Doing this spot. I feel like 9. All right. So I'm going to do this one. Brian's going to do this. Drum roll. Who's our lucky winner? 9. This is a long drum.
A long drum roll.
Oh, sorry. He was waiting for me. All right. So we're continuing this on. Give us just a second. All right. Okay. Okay. All right. Maria Koppel, you are the lucky winner tonight of Amanda's book. This is so exciting. Congratulations, Maria. You're
great.
Yes, and thank you for your contributions. Thanks for your questions tonight. I also want to thank Fiat Ministry for producing all of our segments. You can find out more about them at www.fiatministrynetwork.tv. And we want to give them a thank you as well. There we go. And friends, this concludes our Movement Monday for tonight with Amanda Morin. And we were so glad that you were able to join us tonight. And we look forward to seeing you again next week when we're going to have Pam Mines on with us of JP Jumpers. Woo-hoo. Yay, Pam! Thank you again, Amanda. This has been absolutely wonderful. And it's been I learned so much just by listening to you tonight.
I'm glad. That's great.
I feel like we're really on the same page with a lot of our ideas. I do too. I think that's wonderful. It's a great way to start unifying everything everybody's doing and lifting everybody up. Let's amplify everybody's messages. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's always fun, while we interview everyone from all different walks, it's always fun when I connect with other people in the world of autism. Because as we were talking about earlier, this is a world that I would love to see grow a strong voice in the world of advocacy. And while we have a voice, I feel like we can do so much more work, and we've got to find one another out there.
Get the tribe. Got to get the tribe together, and we'll.
That's right. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for all that you do, Amanda, and just continue just making waves and doing awesome things in our world of not only autism, but in the disability at special needs world in general. So thank you.
Great.
It's been a pleasure.
All right.